It's Wednesday, February 8th, 2017, and Bodega Bar is busy. Ohio State senior Reagan Tokes is finishing up her shift at the popular spot. Located in Columbus's Arts District, Bodega Bar draws a crowd of regulars from nearby OSU.
Reagan Tokes is a 21-year-old clinical psychology major, just a few short months from graduation. She is driven and well-liked.
After cashing out, Reagan decides to grab a quick bite.
It isn't unusual for staff to stick around and eat after a shift. They get a discount on the food, and the kids are a pretty tight-knit group who like to socialize.
Reagan finishes her meal and heads out around 9:45 p.m.
She texts her dad, Toby, who lives in Florida, letting him know she'll call when she gets home safe.
Checking in with her dad by text is still a regular routine, even after 4 years of Reagan living on her own.
It is a text Reagan's father will never receive.
Reagan Tokes disappears into the snowy night, and her friends and family never see her again.
It will take over a year of investigation and reforms to Ohio's legal system before justice is served, and Reagan Tokes' disappearance is finally answered by placing someone behind bars. Columbus, Ohio, nestled along the meandering Scioto River. Just under 1 million residents call this popular state capital home.
Columbus is a mid-sized American city renowned for its outdoor spaces. In particular, the Scioto Mile, a long stretch of river dotted with dozens of municipal parks. Columbus is also home to the famed Ohio State University, their 8-time national championship football team, the Buckeyes.
Just north of Columbus is the suburb of Grove City, a recreational paradise and bedroom community. It is here that Toby and Lisa Tokes choose to raise their family.
On March 13, 1995, Toby and Lisa welcome their first daughter, Regan Delaney Tokes.
Even from a young age, Reagan has a laugh that can fill a room, and her big smile is only matched by her even bigger heart.
Reagan is an outgoing and energetic child and a natural caregiver. When her little sister Mackenzie is born, she is instantly devoted to her.
Reagan often puts others ahead of herself. She does mission work through her local Methodist church and volunteers at a soup kitchen with her mom, Lisa.
Reagan is incredibly studious and gets amazing grades, while also playing on the varsity tennis and lacrosse teams.
But Reagan's biggest passion lays in her love of Ohio State and the Buckeyes.
Reagan's dad, Toby, brings her to see her first home game when she's just 5 years old. She decides in that moment that when she grows up, she's going to be a Buckeye.
Some of the pictures you'll see, show her with Buckeye regalia and hats, and, she's a typical happy young lady looking forward to the rest of her life.
Years later, when it comes time to apply for college, there is only one option for Reagan: OSU.
She doesn't apply anywhere else, and of course, she gets in.
In Reagan's final year of high school, Dad Toby is offered a job in Florida.
It's too big of an opportunity to pass up, so Lisa and Mackenzie agree to the move. Reagan stays behind in Columbus to fulfill her childhood dream of becoming a Buckeye.
She's a typical college student. She was majoring and close to graduating with a psychology degree. By all accounts, she had lots of friends. She was a fan of the Ohio State Buckeyes, like a lot of people are, and attended games with her friends.
Reagan finds a place off campus and moves in with 4 girls. The roommates form a bond, helping Toby and Lisa worry less about being so far from their daughter.
Toby still stays in constant contact with Reagan through text and phone calls, and sisters Mackenzie and Reagan are always communicating on Twitter.
Shortly after school starts, Reagan meets tall, blonde Jake Hadley.
Reagan and Jake fall head over heels for each other. It's definitely puppy love.
Despite being in love, Reagan has other priorities. Midway through her senior year, she ends things with Jake.
Reagan decides to focus on her degree. She also decides to change majors.
Reagan had been enrolled in pre-med, but is now on her way to finishing a BA in clinical psychology.
In February 2017, Reagan's grown-up life is on the cusp of getting started.
She even has work lined up after graduation in Cleveland, where she hopes to work for a few years before starting her own practice.
For now, Reagan has taken a job at Bodega Bar to save up for the big move.
Bodega Bar is a hip and lively gastropub with over 150 beers on tap. It's young and trendy and a great place for Reagan to work. She arrives for her shift on Wednesday, February 8th and checks in with her manager.
While at work, Reagan texts her dad to let him know she'll be finished around 9. She says she'll send a text before bed.
It's pretty normal for a parent to worry about a child, especially a daughter living far away.
And there's extra reason for caution. In the past few weeks, Columbus has seen a spree of violent crimes in its German Village neighborhood, not far from Bodega Bar.
Several women have been held at knife point and robbed. The most recent attack involved a young woman being pistol whipped by a masked assailant.
Reagan isn't thinking about the news. She just wants to get through her shift. Bodega is busy for a Wednesday.
Reagan's shift ends at around 9 p.m. and she settles up her float. She decides to stick around and have a quick bite. She finishes her meal sometime after 9:30 and gets ready to head home.
She says goodnight to her friends and checks with her manager on the upcoming schedule.
CCTV footage from Bodega shows her leaving at 9:43 p.m.
Reagan usually asks a coworker to walk her to her car, but for some reason we will never know, she doesn't that fateful Wednesday.
Like every other night, her car is parked in a lot behind the bar.
Reagan Tokes steps out into the cold night air and into a nightmare. It's nearing midnight on February 8th, 2017, and Toby Tokes still hasn't heard from his daughter Reagan. Reagan's parents are concerned since Reagan said she'd text when she's done work, and it's been hours. But it's not uncommon in the restaurant industry to get stuck working later than expected if it's especially busy.
This isn't like Reagan. She's very good about checking in and hardly goes 30 minutes without sending a message to friends or family. She would have likely texted to say she's stuck working late.
Toby tries calling his daughter all night, but she never answers. At 2 a.m., his calls go straight to voicemail. Her phone battery must have died.
This is a huge red flag. The bar is closed, and not only is there still no word from Reagan, but straight to voicemail is not a good sign.
The next day, Reagan's parents are more than worried. They still haven't heard from her.
In a situation like this, you hope for a rational reason, like she's probably still asleep or in class.
Reagan's mother calls the university only to be informed that Reagan hasn't attended any of her classes that day. So they call her roommates.
There are no signs that Reagan came home. It looks like her bed hasn't been slept in. Reagan's parents call police to report their daughter missing, but it gets them nowhere.
Reagan's parents are told that because they weren't the last ones to have seen her, they are not able to file a report.
Thinking quickly, Reagan's mom calls the manager at Bodega and asks him to file the report. He does.
Police put out an APB for the disappearance of a 21-year-old Caucasian female.
The Tokes family is beginning to panic. Reagan's sister Mackenzie gets an idea to post on Twitter. Early on February 9th, she writes, "Everyone, please help. My sister Reagan Tokes is missing from OSU. Please contact if you know anything. Please pray." The text gets shared and retweeted a lot. They're praying someone will know something that can help locate Reagan.
Reagan's roommates reach out to the OSU campus to see if anyone there knows where she is.
As friends and family scramble to find Reagan, a tragic discovery is being made several miles south of Bodega Bar in Scioto Grove Metro Park.
At noon on Thursday, February 9th, a man sees what he thinks is a mannequin on the ground. But as he approaches, he sees a clear and more terrifying reality.
A woman is laying on the ground, stripped naked. There's blood in the snow around her. Her right arm lays draped over her face, and she's been shot.
There is no clothing and no ID to identify the body, but it does match Reagan Tokes' description.
Detective Rick Forney is called to the scene. The first things he notices are a necklace and a circular tattoo.
It's a gold-colored necklace with a pendant that has blue and white-colored stones. And she's wearing ball-shaped earrings. That's not much to go on.
Patrols are sent out to canvass the nearby neighborhood, while Detective Rick Forney makes the drive to Reagan Tokes' apartment.
Police ask Reagan's roommates if they know of any possible identifying markers. They answer that she has only one, a small circular tattoo on her ribcage.
Toby and Lisa Tokes are thousands of miles away in Florida when they receive the crushing news that their eldest daughter Reagan has been killed.
This is the worst nightmare for any parent, and Reagan's sister is still in high school at the time.
Since the parents are in Florida, they're unable to provide a positive ID. So Lisa's brother, Reagan's uncle, is tasked with visiting the morgue to confirm that the body found in the park is indeed his 21-year-old niece.
Reagan Tokes was brutally and savagely murdered just weeks before her 22nd birthday.
The coroner confirms Reagan has been shot twice in the head, once at close range, and her body shows signs of sexual assault.
Other than the information gleaned from the body, police find little other evidence at the scene. Despite scouring the area, they discover no bullet casings.
Reagan Tokes' killing is announced at 11 p.m. on the nightly news.
It was the worst type of crime that can happen. Typically, newspapers cover tragedies, and they cover shootings and homicides where people know their attacker. You know, it could be domestic violence, it could be an acquaintance, it could be a bar fight where somebody, gets into a problem or a dispute. And in this case, it was completely random.
Columbus is already reeling from a series of brazen attacks, and now a beautiful and bright young woman has been murdered and discarded in a public park. All of Columbus is left wondering who could have done such an evil thing, and will they strike again? On February 8, 2017, 21-year-old Reagan Tokes finishes her shift at Bodega Bar and heads home.
When her family doesn't hear from Reagan all night, her sister Mackenzie posts a plea on Twitter the next day, asking for any information.
By noon, Reagan's body has been discovered in Scioto Grove Metro Park. She's naked and has been shot in the head.
Reagan is identified by the small tattoo on her ribcage.
Detective Rick Forney hunts for clues at the scene, but other than a necklace, police have little to go on.
An examination of Reagan Tokes' body reveals 2 gunshot wounds, one from extremely close range, but despite extensive searching, no bullet casings are found.
And her car, a 1999 silver Acura, is missing.
Police get to work speaking to friends and family of the victim. Reagan's roommates tell investigators that she has recently broken up with a boyfriend.
Jake Hadley is brought in for questioning. When a woman is found murdered, a great place to start to look for answers is with those closest to her.
Stranger homicide is rare, and usually it's young men who are more likely to fall victim. Women are much more likely to be murdered by men known to them.
Forney can tell Jake is devastated by the news of her death, and he has an alibi for the night before.
While ex-lovers are often to blame for these types of killings, Forney puts Jake on the back burner as a suspect. Meanwhile, test results from Reagan Tokes' body come back from the lab.
Death is estimated between midnight and 1 a.m., and Reagan's body shows signs of sexual assault. Forney and his team begin looking into the sexual offender registry.
They also request access to Reagan's bank, cell phone, and other records, but those may take days to come.
Waiting is often one of the hardest parts. The Tokes family are desperate for answers, and even more so, justice.
Reagan's car is also missing, so police flag her license plate with the DMV. The next day, on February 10th, her plate is picked up by a scanner on a garbage truck.
Automated license plate readers, or LPRs, can capture the image of a passing vehicle and compare that license plate against official hot lists.
Reagan's car is located on Oakwood Avenue, a little over a mile north of Scioto Grove Park. It's a treasure trove of evidence for police.
When officers get to Reagan's vehicle, there's a strong smell of gas when the doors are open, and techs find cigarette burns on the front seat.
Police also find a gas tank in the trunk. It all points to an attempt to burn the car, presumably to hide any physical or DNA evidence.
Investigators strike gold when they discover a cigarette under the passenger seat. Why? Because Reagan Tokes didn't smoke.
This could be the lead investigators desperately need. If there's any DNA on that cigarette, it could give police a potential suspect.
The cigarette is tested for DNA and results come back quickly.
The DNA is a match for Brian Goldsby, a convicted felon who was released from prison just a few months earlier.
29-year-old Brian Goldsby is a violent man with an extremely turbulent past.
Goldsby had been arrested 6 years ago for a crime that bore a chilling resemblance to Reagan Tokes' murder.
In 2010, Goldsby abducted a woman and her toddler at knife point. He raped her in front of her child and forced her to drive around looking for ATMs in an attempt to withdraw money.
And just like whoever killed Reagan Tokes, Goldsby had a knack for trying to destroy evidence.
Goldsby forced the woman to drive home and then made her shower to remove any traces of DNA he may have left on her body.
Though the victim in that attack survived, these are all clues to a possible similar MO for whoever is responsible for killing Reagan.
The victim of that case did not want to testify out of fear, and so Brian got a lesser sentence for robbery and attempted rape.
Brian Goldsby is sentenced to 2 6-year custodial terms to be served concurrently. This means he has to serve both sentences at the same time.
The 6 months Brian spent in prison awaiting his 2011 trial count as time served. So even though he is originally not to be released until May 2017, Brian is out on the streets in November of 2016.
During his time in prison, he committed 52 different infractions and was moved around to 5 different prisons because he was causing so much trouble.
Brian is released just 3 months before Reagan Tokes disappears and is found dead.
You know, he was convicted and was serving, this is for robbery and attempted rape. So he was serving a 6-year sentence and eventually was released on this probation with this ankle monitor.
In November 2016, Brian Goldsby is released. He's required to live in a privately run, privately monitored halfway house.
Just over a month later, the string of attacks begin in Columbus's neighborhood of German Village.
People were scared. There are robberies and attacks happening at an alarming rate, and it builds to this sweet and innocent young woman being shot and left naked in a park. And the murderer is at large. It's absolutely terrifying.
There were students who were traumatized by the concept of somebody just being taken from them.
Reagan's death was all over social media and the news. The police really feel the pressure from the community. No one feels safe, and they want justice.
Detective Forney discovers that the halfway house where Brian Goldsby lives is less than 1 mile from Oakwood Avenue, where Reagan's car is discovered.
This is more than enough grounds for an arrest warrant. Forney calls the local judge and has it sent over.
Forney wants to catch Goldsby by surprise, so he and the SWAT team wait until the early day to strike. Brian is armed and dangerous and could definitely make a run. Investigators need to be smart and stealthy to make sure he's home and doesn't have the opportunity to do anything reckless. The Columbus SWAT team surrounds Goldsby's halfway house at approximately 4 a.m. on February 11th.
Got on here real quick.
Goldsby has read his Miranda rights, meaning he has the right to remain silent, but he continues to talk anyway. He insists he didn't do whatever it is they think he did.
Oddly enough, Brian Goldsby recognizes Detective Forney. Forney had been part of the team that had captured Goldsby more than 6 years earlier.
Perhaps with the level of familiarity, Brian Goldsby agrees to be interviewed without a lawyer.
The two men talk for over 6 hours, and not once does Brian Goldsby request to have an attorney present. That doesn't mean Brian Goldsby's not nervous, though.
Brian Goldsby has reason to be nervous because on his ankle is a GPS monitor mandated as part of his parole. Forney is already guessing that it just may place Brian Goldsby outside of Bodega Bar and in Scioto Grove Park on the night of February 8th.
The ankle monitor is promising, but by no means a slam dunk. Detective Rick Forney knows it will take time to get tracking data, and there's no guarantee it is functioning properly either. Police cross their fingers and wait for the tracking data from the ankle monitor. while Detective Forney uses the time he has with his old buddy Brian Goldsby to try and catch him in a lie. "21-year-old Reagan Tokes' naked body is discovered in Ohio's Scioto Grove Metro Park in February 2017. She's been raped and shot twice in the head in an execution-style killing. 2 days after Reagan is killed, her car is discovered abandoned.
There are signs that someone attempted to burn the car, and a cigarette butt is sent to the lab for DNA testing.
DNA from the cigarette matches a known felon, Brian Goldsby, who has been released from prison just a few months earlier.
As police await information from Goldsby's parole-issue tracking device, Detective Rick Forney gets reacquainted with Goldsby, since he was part of the team that arrested Goldsby 6 years ago.
They had an ankle monitor on Brian Goldsby, which was supposed to track his whereabouts. Unfortunately, the Ohio Parole Authority, which was supposed to be doing that, was not doing a very good job. And while he was out, he still wore the bracelet, the ankle monitor, but it wasn't being monitored.
Ankle bracelets need to be monitored in real time. The GPS data is recorded, but if it's not being monitored, then it's really only a hindsight tool. Instead of preventing a crime, you're waiting until something happens to look at the recorded location data.
As the interview continues, Detective Forney receives a copy of the Reagan Tokes banking activity.
Reagan's banking records show several failed attempts to withdraw large sums of money on the night of February 8th between the hours of 10 p.m. and midnight.
These include a rejected $500 withdrawal at an ATM in Columbus's German Village and another attempt at a Chase Bank several blocks away. And over an hour later, a successful withdrawal of $60.
These attempts to withdraw money are definitely similar to Goldsby's MO from his 2010 crime. Forney uses Street View printouts to show Goldsby where he believes he was on the night of February 8th.
The photos are a great tactic for throwing Brian off. Now Brian believes police may have surveillance footage of his activities on the night in question.
Within the first half hour of questioning, Goldsby admits to abducting Reagan Tokes at gunpoint. He says he did this just outside of Bodega Bar a little before 10 p.m.
Goldsby says he forces Reagan into her car and they drove around trying to get cash from ATMs.
But Goldsby insists he had nothing to do with sexually assaulting Reagan, and he adamantly denies he knows anything about Reagan's death.
According to Goldsby, the last time he saw Reagan, she was alive.
Brian claims he did force Reagan to drive around, and he even had her drive to Scioto Grove Park, but that is where he draws the line.
Goldsby insists he told Reagan to strip naked and hide for 30 minutes. He says that she was pleading for her life.
Goldsby then claims to have driven away. As far as he knows, Reagan was unharmed.
As Brian Goldsby and Detective Forney continue playing cat and mouse, the GPS tracking info from the ankle monitor comes in.
What they did was kind of a forensic analysis after the fact to show exactly where he went the evening that he abducted Reagan Tokes, and they had very detailed maps.
The GPS data shows that at around 7:30 p.m., Brian takes a bus from his halfway house to the Short North Arts District, near Bodega Bar, where Reagan is working.
GPS shows Goldsby wandered the streets nearby Reagan's work. But it doesn't just show where Brian was, it shows the speed at which he was moving.
Brian had been moving at speeds between 2 and 5 miles per hour until just before 10 p.m. when he starts traveling at over 20 miles per hour.
This must be the time he forces himself into Reagan's car. What's more, the rest of the ankle monitor locations match up exactly with Reagan's attempts to withdraw money from nearby ATMs.
Brian moves almost constantly during the hours Reagan is abducted, except for a 20-minute interval where he stops in an alley near the Second Chase ATM.
Police conclude this must be where and when Reagan was sexually assaulted.
A little after 11 p.m., a second attempt is made at the First Chase ATM, and $60 is withdrawn.
Just after this, surveillance from a gas station shows Reagan Tokes filling up her car.
Increasingly, cameras are everywhere, and that was one of the assets to law enforcement, is that there were surveillance cameras that captured video of the assailant's car, the whereabouts of Reagan as she was working and as she was leaving the restaurant where she was working that night.
A figure can be seen in the passenger seat, but it is too blurry to make anyone out clearly.
Forney's theory is Reagan is complying with anything Brian Goldsby asks, believing the only hope she has is to do exactly what she's told.
GPS data confirms Goldsby is in Scioto Park just after midnight.
It's a lot of circumstantial evidence, and Brian Goldsby has admitted to a lot. But he insists he didn't kill Reagan Tokes. And there's no murder weapon, no direct proof to put him at the scene of the shooting.
This may seem like a lot of evidence, but to convict beyond a reasonable doubt and ensure that Reagan's killer is behind bars, investigators need more. If they try him and it's not enough, then he could walk free, and that's just not something they're willing to risk.
Detective Forney's interrogation hits a standstill.
CCTV footage offers a scintillating clue. It's Goldsby at a gas station purchasing a gas tank a little before 1 a.m., the same gas tank that was found in Reagan's car.
This is significant. They have not only footage of Brian buying tools to potentially burn evidence, but the gas tank matches the one found in Reagan's Acura.
Goldsby's story continues to change. He says at the time he was visiting a girlfriend.
Tracking info does show Goldsby at McDonald's at 1:30 a.m. It's not airtight, but it is an alibi.
The physical evidence is piling up quickly, but Forney is still determined to get a confession.
Forney knows that the longer he keeps Goldsby talking, the deeper a hole Brian will dig for himself.
Having 6 hours to interrogate a suspect without a lawyer present can be a gift for any detective, and Rick Forney doesn't want to waste this precious opportunity.
Forney allows Brian to go out for a smoke, setting him off with another investigator.
CCTV footage of the parking lot also records audio, and Forney watches from inside.
As he smokes, Goldsby shares with the officer that he did indeed rape Reagan.
Forney tells Goldsby he knows he raped Reagan, and he asks, if it wasn't you who killed her, then who? Was there someone else with you that night?
Brian says yes, another man was with him that night, a man who forced him to abduct Reagan.
Brian claims he was acting out of fear that his own child and baby mama were at risk. He says he was doing what he had to do in order to protect his family.
He offers up a name, TJ, and he begins to paint a picture of a mastermind who orchestrates the horrible events of February 8th. Forney is skeptical of the TJ story from the start, but if it gets Goldsby talking, he's happy to listen.
Goldsby now starts to retell his story from the beginning. He explains that he took a bus towards the Short North Arts District after work on February 8th.
This timeline matches the GPS tracking, which shows Brian moving north at approximately 7:30 p.m.
Brian insists he was looking to kill some time and had no reason for choosing that part of town.
This is where the alleged TJ comes into picture. Brian says he bumped into TJ, someone to whom he owes money.
TJ has 3 guns on him and insists Brian pay him $2,000.
Brian says he had no cash, so TJ gives him a gun and forces him to grab Reagan as she comes out of Bodega Bar. Brian is to drive Reagan around getting cash from ATMs. Brian drops TJ off in Scioto Park, where he will wait. Detective Forney stops Brian to ask why he wouldn't take a chance to just leave TJ in the park.
Over the next 2 hours, Brian says he and Reagan attempt to make several withdrawals before returning to TJ.
Brian says he has no choice but to watch as TJ marches Reagan deeper into the park and shoots her in the head. Once from behind while she's walking, and again from close range.
To Detective Forney, it's a chilling confession, disguised as a story, but he continues to play along with Brian's account.
Forney still has hopes of tracking down the murder weapon, so he asks Brian what happened to the gun.
Brian says he will tell the police what they want to know, but only if he can have a couple of hamburgers.
Within an hour, Goldsby's munching away and telling detectives that TJ makes him get rid of the gun and the bullet casings. Goldsby says he dropped the gun in one storm drain and the casings on another street a few blocks away.
Sure enough, he is telling the truth, and both bullet casings and gun are recovered. Goldsby also says he was instructed to burn the car, but despite buying a gas tank, he wasn't able to.
Goolsby then repeats the story of visiting his girlfriend and taking her to McDonald's.
Hatissa Jackson confirms her boyfriend Brian picked her up that night in a silver car, matching the description of Reagan's.
She also says he arrives with presents, $60 in cash, a wallet, and a Kate Spade purse, the same brand owned by Regan Tokes.
When Brian gave Hatissa the black purse belonging to Reagan, there was a canister of pepper spray in it.
Police don't get the full confession they were hoping for, but Brian Goolsby's long story, combined with their evidence, is more than enough to officially charge him with the murder of Regan Tokes.
3 days later, on Valentine's Day, 21-year-old Regan Tokes is laid to rest. Hundreds attend her memorial service and share stories with her family of the kind and driven young woman they loved so much.
Brian Goolsby appears in court for an initial hearing.
Goolsby is charged with 9 counts, including aggravated murder. And in Ohio, a charge of aggravated murder can carry the death penalty.
But Goolsby's defense attorney, Diane Minash, puts forward a motion to delay the trial.
In 2017, proposed legislation is about to go before the Ohio State Assembly. House Bill 369 would ban the death penalty in all instances.
Brian's lawyers argued that his case cannot be tried until the matter of Bill 369 is resolved. But Franklin County Prosecutor Ron O'Brien is opposed to the motion.
It is up to the presiding judge to determine if the trial will proceed. The judge adjourns to consider.
If this motion goes through, Regan Tokes' family will be forced to wait for the slow wheels of government to turn, and any hope of justice for Regan will come to a screeching halt. Lead detective Rick Forney has heard enough of suspect Brian Goolsby's wild stories, and he is charged with aggravated murder of popular Buckeye Regan Tokes.
Aggravated murder is a crime that can warrant the death penalty in the state of Ohio.
But House Bill 369 is on the table before the state legislation. If passed, it would see the death penalty banned.
Goolsby's attorney, Diane Minash, puts forward a motion to delay his trial until the bill has been voted on.
With no legal precedent in place, the judge denies the motion. Brian Goolsby's trial is set to begin in February 2018.
The courtroom often was filled with Ohio State students, some of them journalism students who were covering the case as well. And there was a real kind of balance in terms of reporting details and what to report and respecting the privacy of the family.
Brian's defense lawyer requested a change of venue due to the large amount of media attention the case was receiving and expressed concern that the jury could be biased. In the end, the trial was not moved, but was tried in Franklin County.
In her opening statement, defense attorney Diane Minash argues that aggravated assault is used disproportionately as a charge against African Americans. She speculates that if Brian Goolsby were white, the death penalty would not even be on the table.
It's an explosive argument for the defense. The prosecution, however, sticks to the facts. The prosecution opens its case by bringing ballistics expert Matthew White to the stand.
White goes over ballistics evidence and a timeline of the recovery of the weapon from 2 separate storm drains. White explains the casings and revolver are a match for the 2 slugs removed from Reagan's head.
Regan's DNA is recovered from inside the barrel of the revolver.
The most damning part of White's testimony explains the execution nature of the shooting.
The fact that the second shot came from above Reagan as she was already on the ground demonstrates another layer of intent. This is crucial in differentiating the charge of murder from aggravated murder.
In Ohio, aggravated murder can be defined as when someone kills another person while committing or attempting to commit or fleeing after committing a crime such as rape, kidnapping, or burglary.
Detective Rick Forney takes the stand to outline the findings from the GPS data taken from Goolsby's ankle monitor.
Knowing the timestamp of when he got in the car with her and where he drove and what he did, they kind of recreated the couple of hours of terror that Regan must have felt in a car where she couldn't get out.
Comparing Goolsby's GPS data against Regan Tokes' banking transactions, Detective Forney shows that Brian Goolsby was with Reagan every step of the night.
The case continues, and Goolsby's now ex-girlfriend Hatissa Jackson testifies. For the prosecution,
She tells the jury about her creepy present of a Kate Spade purse and her trip to McDonald's in a silver car.
in bombshell testimony, Hatissa also testifies that in July 2017, Brian confesses to her that he shot Reagan, that there is no TJ. Hatissa says Brian killed Reagan because he was afraid he'd be caught. The prosecution rests.
You could just feel it was a palpable feeling of grief that permeated everything in the courtroom, and often you would hear gasps and sobs.
When defense lawyer Diane Minash is asked to present her case, she says she has no new evidence. She also rests. It seems the defense has no intention of proving Goldsby's innocence.
Menash's strategy is to leave Brian's life in the hands of the court. Her only goal now is to ensure he does not get the death penalty.
It was really a watershed case in terms of a death penalty case.
Goldsby's lawyer argues that, of course, TJ wasn't real, and that the prosecution was trying to have their cake and eat it too by presenting Brian as a premeditated killer. She asks, what mastermind would give up the location of a murder weapon for a hamburger? What kind of mastermind would commit these crimes while wearing an ankle monitor?
Brian's defense argues that he isn't capable of having prior intent, just as he wasn't capable of burning down a car. To add insult to injury, defense argues that Brian was a victim of systemic failure. And sadly, so was Reagan Tokes.
He was brutalized as a child. The fact that he was born into a mother, 17 years old, who had multiple boyfriends and essentially abandoned him at a young age, into this family that had a legacy of mental health issues and drug abuse and crime and domestic abuse. Those were factors that mitigated his behavior somewhat.
The jury retires to deliberate Brian Goldsby's innocence and, if he's guilty, whether he deserves the death penalty. Deliberation lasts a little over 7 hours, and the verdict comes back: guilty.
On March 13th, 2018, Brian Goldsby is found guilty of all counts in kidnapping, robbery, rape, and aggravated murder, the very day that would have been Reagan's 23rd birthday.
But it isn't the verdict the Tokes family is hoping for.
The jury finds Brian guilty on all counts, including aggravated murder, but it's split on the death penalty.
In Ohio, the decision must unanimously decide that the aggravating circumstances outweigh the mitigating factors. Without a unanimous decision, the jury must recommend a lesser sentence.
So Brian is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
It was a very powerful and often criticized element of this case is that, a defense attorney sometimes has to give the strongest appeals to those who society is most disgusted with. Brutal criminals sometimes deserve as much legal defense as wealthy white-collar criminals.
The Tokes family file a lawsuit for failing to accurately monitor Brian while he was on parole. What was the point of him having a GPS monitor on his ankle if no one was actually monitoring it?
And the prosecution appeals in hopes the jury will be overturned and the death penalty applied. Reagan Tokes' family believes the only true justice is to have Brian Goldsby pay for his crimes with his life. With Ohio being 8th overall in the United States for sentencing prisoners to death, there's a strong chance the family might get what they ask for. But the jury is split on sentencing, and Goldsby receives life in prison instead of the death penalty. Reagan Tokes' family is not satisfied, and the prosecution appeals to have the life sentence overturned and the death penalty applied.
The case is brought before the Ohio Appellate Court.
Goldsby is sentenced to an additional 66 years on top of his life sentence for 6 crimes he committed in January and February 2017 in Columbus's German village.
But he is not sentenced to death. The court affirmed the initial ruling and found that the judge acted appropriately. Brian Goldsby will not die at the hands of the state.
Brian told police that when he took Reagan to the gas station, he promised her that everything's gonna be all right. And he said, "She believed me, man, she believed me." He also said that she begged for her life, saying, "All I want to do is live."
Reagan's parents, Toby and Lisa, are devastated when their appeal fails. But they don't stop there.
Separate lawsuits are brought against Ohio's correctional services, the halfway house that housed Brian, and the private company responsible for monitoring him.
The argument is that systemic failure is equally responsible for Reagan Tokes' death. The halfway house that failed to monitor Brian, the GPS data was not being tracked in real time, and Brian's early release from prison.
The lawsuits against Ohio State Correctional Services and the halfway house are dismissed. But there is one ray of hope.
The company responsible for overseeing Goldsby's ankle monitor reaches a settlement with the Tokes family for an undisclosed sum.
It's a remarkable turn of events, and one that will change the course of Reagan Tokes' legacy. Reagan's life was devoted to helping others, either at the soup kitchen or through her upcoming degree in clinical psychology. She would have made a real difference in the world, in areas that need it most. And those that knew and loved her are ensuring that her life's work continues.
Reagan Tokes is posthumously awarded her Bachelor of Arts, which her parents proudly accept at spring graduation.
And a Kickstarter, initiated by Reagan's ex, Jake Hadley, brings in over $100,000.
The money grows into the Reagan Tokes Memorial Foundation, which awards 2 Ohio State University scholarships annually to proud Buckeyes like Reagan.
So far, they've raised over $450,000 in scholarships.
And in Scioto Grove Metro Park, near where Reagan's body is discovered that horrible February in 2017, a memorial is laid in her honor. It features a fountain to represent Reagan's astrological sign Pisces. This site is lined with 7 Buckeye trees in honor of her beloved alma mater.
In Columbus, self-defense classes are offered in Reagan's name.
It was a commitment, I think, on their part to do something that could be a benefit to their daughter and a legacy, leave a legacy of their daughter's life.
And Toby and Lisa keep fighting for systemic change.
2019, the Reagan Tokes Act is drafted. It proposes sweeping reforms to Ohio's legal system.
The Reagan Tokes Act is a multi-pronged proposal. It would see a drastic overhaul in rehabilitation and monitoring programs for recently released violent and sexual offenders.
And GPS monitoring would require regular, real-time check-ins.
Most importantly, the Reagan Tokes Act will allow prisoner review boards to extend sentencing based on violent infractions.
I sit in courtrooms now, and the Reagan Tokes Act is invoked repeatedly during sentencing. People just know it.
Reagan's murder was tragic, and in many aspects even more so because it was preventable.
They don't want her memory and her legacy to be diminished. And so we will hear about this for a long, long time.
But thanks to the Tokes family's fighting spirit and perseverance, Reagan's legacy lives on by making sure her death leads to others being safe, while her own killer is behind bars for the rest of his natural life.